Hi all, it's Kia of Kia Comments and I am back with another video. Today I want to do my May reading wrap up. I didn't read very many books in May, but all of the books that I read were interesting, informative, and illuminating. I want to get started with my first book, which is a graphic novel by Brian K. Vaughan and Pia Guerra called Y the Last Man. This book, quite frankly, was outstanding. My co-worker, Jessie, shout out Jessie, put me up on game about this book. It follows a young male, Yorick, and his monkey, Ampersand, who's also male, and they are the last individuals on the planet with the Y chromosome. Every other individual born or in embryo form with the Y chromosome has been eradicated. So this is an apocalyptic graphic novel. It comes out in 60 editions and I have read all of the editions. I cannot sing the praises of this graphic novel enough. Brian K. Vaughan and Pia Guerra really understood, I feel, that with the premise of The Last Man on Earth, there were a lot of things that could be done, and they did it, and they did it well. They did not fall into cliche, and they did not play up a character that was initially likable, but that was always interesting and that I was always compelled to read about. Other additions in this book that I found deeply compelling were the characters that surrounded Yorick. The new president of the United States is a female, and she assigns Yorick and Special Agent 355 to help him get from New York to Washington, D.C., where his mother, who is also a big part of the U.S. government, resides. Agent 355, I really liked her. The U.S. president, however, is not sure of Agent 355 or the agency that 355 represents and assigns another female, Alta, from Israel to basically track Yorick and Agent 355 on their journey. But Alta has ulterior motives to why she wants to help Yorick. It is just a fantastic graphic novel, and I recommend that anybody who can get their hands on it, read it. The next book I want to discuss is the novel The 12 Tribes of Hatti by Ayanna Mathis. This novel I found extremely interesting and illuminating and educational. The novel follows Hatti and her children, and the novel is told from the perspective of Hatti, which is the first chapter, as well as her 3 children. The reason I found this novel interesting is because I felt as though each chapter could read as standalone short stories. And a lot of books are doing that now. They are packaging or being packaged as short stories in a novel, or short stories in novel form, or as novels, but they read as short stories. And as somebody who loves short stories as well as novels, I really appreciate the way that individuals in the industry are marketing books in this manner to both short story readers as well as novel readers. So each chapter spans decades, and we see the perspective of Hatti and what goes on in Hatti's life and the lives of her children through various different perspectives. The other reason that I found this novel illuminating is because it deals with a generation in African American culture and history that I do not know very much about. Hatti and her husband August are both from the South and were a part of the African American migration of individuals in the late 1920s, 30s, and 40s from the South to the North. These individuals, as far as I know, moved from the South to the North in hopes of a better life. And in some ways they got it, and in other ways, the life that they hoped for never really met their expectations. And you very much get this feeling with Hatti, who, regardless of this feeling, swears to never go back to the South where she came from. Interesting narrators I felt in this particular novel was Hatti, who opens the story at 17. She has 2 children, twins, Jubilee and Philadelphia, who are sick with the croup. Hattie's son Floyd, who I think narrates the second chapter, is a young male who is currently in the South. He's a musician and he is dealing with his homosexuality. And I found the way that Ayanna Mathis handled this issue during this time period in the South, narrated by an individual who comes from the North, was very adeptly and poignantly done. There's a daughter that Hattie has who narrates the novel called Alice, and she was definitely off kilter, but she is suffering from the guilt of seeing one of her brothers molested as a child and saying nothing. And you see the ramifications of that guilt and how it manifests in her adult life. And you also get these peripheral views of Hattie and Hattie's children and what is going on during the decades that the novel follow this family. A very, very well written, very enriching, very culturally telling book. The next novel that I'm going to review is This Is How You Lose Her by Junot Díaz. This is the third book written by Junot Díaz that I have read. The book, I would definitely say, is polarizing because Junot Díaz writes from the perspective of Dominican males. He writes from the perspective of Dominican males who cheat on their women, and he writes from the perspective of Dominican males who objectify women. A lot of individuals find this type of narration, for lack of a better term, chauvinistic and patriarchal. And I do think that this kind of narration is both of those things, but I also think that this narration is very much representative of a certain part of the culture seen within the Dominican Republic community, and to a wider extent, the Caribbean male community. And I don't know that I feel as though I would have been as receptive to a novel, or, well, this is a collection of short stories. I don't know that I would have been as receptive to a collection of short stories that didn't authentically represent that particular side of the male community. So with that being said, we follow the protagonist of most of the short stories, Yunya, who's also the protagonist in Junot Díaz's first and second novel, as Yunya cheats on women, as Yunya watches his brother cheat on women, and as Yunya grapples with what this particular aspect of his personality means. The thing that I found also enriching about this novel was that Junot Díaz told a story from the perspective of a female who is with a man who has a wife, and it was very subtly done and very quietly done and very complicated because situations like that aren't always cut and dry. The other thing that I found really, really, really good, and what I enjoy most about Junot Díaz, was his use of first, second, and third person throughout the narratives in his book. So if you are interested in learning about men from a particular type culture, if you are interested in considering the complexity of individuals who don't always do the right thing, if you're interested in a novelist and a short story writer who renders characters that, though they are not likable, they are touching, this might be a book that you want to check out. The last and final book that I want to discuss in my May wrap-up is The God of Small Things by Arundhati Roy. This book is a gem. I love it. I love the language. I love the setting. It's set in Kerala, which is in the south of India. I love narratives told through the voices of children that reveal so much about the individuals in the novel. This novel starts with Rahel looking back on a summer that she spent in her childhood with her twin brother Esther and their cousin Sophie Mall, who visits them from England and also dies that summer. In following the adventures of Sophie Mall and Rahel and Esther, the reader comes to discover what is going on in the culture and in that specific family. The mother of Esther and Isa is a middle-class Indian female who is separated from their father and who falls into an affair with a carpenter who is an untouchable in the village in which they live, and the ramifications and the consequences of this love affair lead to the unfortunate death of their visiting cousin from the UK, Sophie Mall. This book is so steeped in its setting and in the environment that surrounds all of the characters that it is very hard to separate the place from the people. And if any of you have watched any of my other reviews, you will know by now that I love when the place that a book is set is as much of a character as the characters in the book. And I find that Arundhati Roy does this excellently. Another thing that I love about this book is the fact that it is not told in linear fashion. This is something that other reviewers of this book either love or do not like, but I feel as though as people, we don't necessarily tell stories in lineated form, and so I did not have a problem reading this novel as it jumped back and forth to past and present. Finally, the last thing that I loved about this book was the use of language. Even though the story is told retrospectively and is narrated by Rahel as a woman, mostly we see the story through the eyes of Rahel and her twin brother Esther in the past. And the voices of the children and the way that Arundhati Roy accurately portrays the way that children use language and the way that children play with language and the way that children inhabit an environment is really, really, really informative and really, really, really brilliantly done. So if you like a book that focuses on children as narrators, that focuses on social issues of a country, a book that focuses on place so much so that the place is almost an individual itself in the novel, then this book by Arundhati Roy, The God of Small Things, is for you. That's it. Just 4 books, but 4 good books and all educational. I will see you in my next video. Thank you for watching. Bye now.